Morning, everybody. Have you all had coffee? Yeah? I'll try really hard not to send you to sleep, because we are going to talk about policy and other exciting, stimulating, dull, difficult stuff like that. Thank you very much for bringing me over to Ireland. I'm just going to have a quick battle with the technology, if you don't mind, see if I can find my PowerPoint.
You see, I fluffed on that.
You fluffed on something else as well. Can anyone, does anyone support charities in the room, particularly in your out-of-vocation world? Yeah? Can someone shout me out an Irish charity?
Cool.
That's who the fines are going to. The phone over here rang a couple of minutes ago. We'll let him off his £5. Anybody else's phone that goes, £5 to this man to give on to the charity, please. Because we...
30% collection fee as well.
The contractor speaks, doesn't he?
Very good.
How do I know? I'm from a contracting background too, so fair play to him, I'd say. Okay, we seem to be making progress here. Cool. Okay, building information modelling, Professor Andrew Thomas, that would be me. I was introduced as Funding and Policy Chair and Board Member of Constructing Excellence. I've been on this circuit of innovation in construction for about 12 years with a contracting background before that. So I'm very familiar with CITA and Construct.ie, the only two surviving IT construction related best practice organisations from that decade that I've been involved. And it's great to be here with 100 plus people in the room. One of the other things that I've been involved in, and I'll cough it up before we start, I was part of the working group and the top level steering group for the creation of the BIM strategy in the UK. So if you think it's a brilliant document and really, really good, it's all my fault. And if you don't, I'll tell you which of the other working groups did that particular part of the strategy that you're not happy with. I'm here, my brief was to talk to you about BIM and its adoption and the background to how it's occurred and things. And I started thinking about this. And it was definitely a why did they do it? Because I think you need to get that. When they're going to do it by, supposedly, that would be a target. And the what they expect from the marketplace. The one thing you're not going to get from me is the how. I'm not an IT technician, I'm not a service provider, I'm not a software supplier, I'm not even competent and capable of dealing with the practical applications of BIM. You will get some of that, and you'll get it from Naheem, and I think there's a battery of people outside this door who've supported your event who'll be happy to talk to you about that. That isn't my remit, and it isn't my brief. So I want to give you some background as to why BIM was being considered by the UK national government, right? And it's nothing to do with IT and sexy models and visualizations or anything like that. It's actually about the fact that the industry as a whole is largely publicly funded, and when it isn't publicly funded, it's publicly levered through grant support, and even now, in the times when that public money isn't available to lever the projects that are going forwards, the assets are being thrown into public-private joint venture partnerships to be able to lever the private sector money going forwards. So there's something about the government's got some form of obligation to drive and underpin the construction sector, either through its assets, and historically when we were doing this work 2 years ago in the run up to the strategy, it was about the money that they were putting in as well. And when we start to look at this sector, it's not the best performing sector in the world. Yeah? Here's your statistics from 10 plus years ago. Being from the Office of National Statistics, they portrayed them in the most positive way possible. I'd read this, that 3/4 of their projects weren't on budget, and that 2/3 of them were late. Right? It's not the best thing in the world, but that's 10 years ago, so it must have got better, mustn't it? I'm not sure it has dramatically, because there's this year's KPI data on the UK projects, and there aren't many Northern Ireland projects in that UK data set, and there's certainly none from Southern Ireland. But only just over half the projects are on time and on budget. So yes, it's an improvement, but God, if you were buying your car like this and half of them arrived late and weren't to specification, and by the way, the price has gone up since you ordered it, you wouldn't be driving that car, would you? So there's some background as to rather a lot of money, rather a lot of leverage, and rather bad performance. So there's a driver in the background, and we need to do something different to improve that. Not only are things bad in those hard measures of time and cost, but there's also this thing that's appeared more recently, thank you to Kyoto and various other things, that's something called carbon and waste and sustainability. I'm not going to read these statistics to you, neither have I written them. I've stolen them, as you do with any best practice. You disseminate it, don't you? I nicked it from the Environment Agency, yeah? And it doesn't matter whether you believe in this stuff or you don't, and you bought into global warming or you're not, because the truth is, this polar bear isn't either. But the one thing he knows, I suppose, is that his iceberg's a lot smaller this year than it was last year. So the consequences are coming at you, whether you believe in it and whether you embrace it in your business or not. That's a decision for yourself, but it's happening. And there's something about this consumption and waste thing, actually, we're simple people, aren't we? We just want to understand what it means to our business, what it means to our project, what it means to our development appraisal, our investment decision. So we need to be able to turn that thing we don't understand and can't understand how we can actually influence it and understand it in simple terms. And we do actually already, because we know what the consumption of our vehicles are, we know what the consumption of our buildings are, and actually it's not too difficult to turn that into carbon instead of pounds or time. Okay? So we've got a bundle of shit to be dealing with, haven't we, really? Then we've got clarity. You'll get a happy sheet at the end of this.
No.
Yeah?
It's all right.
Please don't write down there, you didn't need to swear. I've had that before on some of the other road shows, and I'm sorry, I just do. It sort of happens, I'm afraid.
You're among friends.
I'm among friends, that's good, yeah. With Reba, I wasn't. There are a few of those who are a bit up themselves and grossly inappropriate use of language, I think, was the term that was used, which I think was the word shit. So anyway, so we've had a little. No, we can't have a swear box. How many contractors have we got apart from him? Yeah. Not only have we got this questionably performing sector within the country, and some targets bought into that were made up by somebody else outside the country, we've also got absolute clarity and a buggered up election in the middle of it as well, in that we have a coalition government, so that means that nobody's policy is right and we have to go down the road of the buggers muddle down the middle. And they made some sweeping decisions, because as is the way with the elections, everything that went before was wrong and everything that's coming next is right until it goes wrong, and then it was their fault. So they made some decisions. They abolished the RDAs, which are the routes for grant support and the routes for administering ERDF money. Those are the levers for development in my book. They knocked on the head some of the quangos who were dealing with the asset transactions with the private sector. They decided that they had to have huge budget cuts, huge efficiency savings, and they came up with austerity, efficiency, and it used to be more for the same, didn't it, in the old days? Now they want more for less. Yeah? I'm not sure what comes after that, apart from maybe just not very much at all. But these dynamics going on in the background set challenges, don't they, to the clients and to the suppliers, and it's all about how you can deliver to those challenges. They then decided that maybe they should use that buying power in a more structured, formal sort of way. So over there was something called the National Procurement Strategy, which influenced how the public sector client made its investments. It encouraged them to do aggregated buying. It encouraged them to have standard scopes and sets of work. It also encouraged them to use their buying power to drive innovation within the supply chain. And that's where BIM starts to fit, because there's so much you can get from the low-hanging fruit, but after a while, through your frameworks, you have to drive the innovation and improvement from the bottom up, but by client leadership. And that's a principle of push and pull, which I want you to embrace, because when we get to the BIM strategy, that's part of what is at the heart of how it's been driven forwards. So they started to use the lever. What did it actually look like? Well, we had some regional frameworks put into place, I'm using the Northwest, A, because I'm very familiar with it, because I worked on the procurement and the framework management of it, and B, because it's the closest bit of England to here, I think. And again, it's just cascading that procurement strategy thing around community benefit, more sustainable delivery of projects, and stimulating the select and few number of suppliers who live within a framework arrangement. Do we find people for being late, or do we just glare and suck our teeth at them at some point? Good afternoon. It just cascades those drivers into a real framework and strategic supplier delivery vehicle. And I've put some of these bullets up for you to see what the client's way of putting over these things are, because these were also embedded into the procurement documents, so they were the points that the suppliers had to address and demonstrate evidence of to be able to win a place on the framework before they even get the right to do any work, or was it compete for any work? It's a framework. One of the other things that we do on this roadshow when we can get him out is we get the Director of Capital Projects from Manchester City Council, who's actually the chair of the steering group for the BIM strategy, and he's also the chair of the BIM task group within Constructing Excellence. This guy believes, and he's putting his money where his mouth is, and that's why your case study is around some of his chosen projects. And we bring him out so that he can tell people why he's interested in BIM, because I've given you the big sort of background and drivers and policy background to why it's important. What does it mean to him as a procuring client? I don't know what his capital spend is next year, but the Manchester City Council bumbles along at about £730 million a year of construction related spend, so they're not an insignificant client in their own right. And his story goes a bit like this, and I'm not doing the Yorkshire accent, and I'm not having my head shaved so I can look like him either, but I have got a tweed jacket and he normally wears or something like that. He starts off with this. What the bloody hell has this got to do with BIM? And some of the contractors who bid in for the framework, their mindset and their submissions were clearly in the place of what the bloody hell has this got to do with me and my business and my projects. But to him, this is what he's trying to treat. These are the documented dynamics of a typical urban school in the Greater Manchester area. It doesn't make good reading, does it? This is what he's trying to change, and then stick that by the side of a marked and quantifiable improvement in educational attainment. Better grades, better qualifications, more progression. That's what they're looking for. So he doesn't see the construction of a school as anything but a vehicle to start to deliver to these targets here. They take a simplistic approach to things. They have 10 design values, and these populate the designers and the constructors and the framework suppliers' way of doing business, and it's part of their gateway decision-making process, it's part of their assessment tools, and these are the things that they expect to occur on every project. And yes, they haven't made it up themselves. It's very, very similar to the CABE stuff. Why wouldn't it be? Someone's thought about it, looked into it, and they've adopted what's right and adapted it for their own purposes. How do they work? They work through collaborative framework agreements. They work on the basis of culture, complementing contract, but not replacing contract. They're looking for measurable benefits. The building has to be fit for purpose, and it has to deliver to the green agenda. They believe that integrated modelling and BIM can actually deliver these things for them in a way that they haven't experienced before on their capital programme. Now, they did start from not the best place in the world 8 years ago when they started letting these frameworks, but they quickly got to, they don't have projects that are late, they don't have projects that aren't on budget, and they haven't had a contentious claim issue for more than 6 years. Right? That's where they got to pretty quickly. They still have to deliver all of this stuff through continuous improvement, and they're looking for different ways of doing it. And for them, BIM is part of that jigsaw as to how they deliver those harder to get benefits, because they know that there is no more low-hanging fruit. If they attack the prime cost anymore, they'll actually be compromising their own suppliers and their own supply chain, and they have a local employment thing, so that means their local ratepayers are actually the ones that get challenged if they attack the price too hard in a brutal sort of way. So they see BIM as a tool to help deliver some things. They also are a lot like, have we got any other public sector organisations in the room? We got any clienty animals? No hands up, which probably means yes, but they're a bit shy. I'll tell you how it is in Manchester, but I'm sure it's not like that, like this over here. Yeah? They have parts of the organisation that design buildings and take it through feasibility and should we, shouldn't we, decision-making gateways. Then they have another department, another part of the organisation that actually oversees the construction and delivery and commissions the building. And then they give it away to another department, who's the education department, who relies on the headmaster and the governors to actually be the users of the building. And they're all disparate, they're all disconnected, and actually they don't deal with each other particularly well. And that's their issue, not the sector's issue, not construction's issue. But they want to deal with those interfaces because it always goes wrong at the point of interface, because we know that from experience, don't we? Well, the clients are twigging it now. So they've started to map this process, and they've aligned their expectations and outputs from BIM to their project management and program management software that bridges these gaps. It's not perfect, but it's an improvement from where it was before of a disjointed process. But to him, he believes absolutely that BIM will be able to be an enabler and a communication enabler to step over those interfaces where historically it's gone wrong. And a dissatisfied client is just somebody who got 99% or less of what they expected. Yeah? And a delighted one is one that gets 101% or more of what they expected. And the variable in there is the expected. And if they can't communicate it right, no matter if you build it to the contract definition or not, the client will either be dissatisfied or delighted if you're more than 2% out of his expectation. So the game is to have a tool that enables you to communicate well and to manage those expectations all the way through the process. And they think BIM is that. Okay? What are they actually looking for from their framework? Some consistency, some way of driving things forward. So they take a kit of parts approach to things. And that means that they're standardising things and they're looking at how they purchase them. And they actually have come up with a catalogue of preferred suppliers that supply certain things. Why does this matter to BIM? Well, actually, the catalogue has in it embedded carbon, energy consumption, footprint of the product, and now they're demanding electronic objects that are populated with that data from their preferred suppliers. And if you can't do it, then you might not be a preferred supplier in a year's time. £5! Fantastic! Give it to him. You look at him, remember his face. You mustn't leave without the £5. Yeah? God, I feel good now. Can you see how they're levering their supply chain partners and their framework arrangements to overcome some of the excuses as to why BIM isn't able to do exactly what they want it to do because that information isn't attached to the object? Well, he's going out there and levering his buying power to make people to do those things. So there's a difference in behaviour there. But I haven't touched on a model at all yet, have I? But I'm giving you the context as to why they're doing these things and how they're being driven forward. There's a level of sophistication and a bit of thinking in there that you perhaps might not expect from some of the client animals in the northwest of England. I'm sure they're very different in Southern Ireland. Here's just some shots of how they value engineer out things. You know, they don't have roof finishings because actually they get scruffy really quickly. They're a bugger to paint. They're a nuisance when you come to maintenance. Do you really need one? Probably not. Should we save that money? I think so. The picture on the right is actually one teacher supervising 2 cohorts of students. The photograph is taken from where the corridor would traditionally have been for the circulation space. And this guy is addressing one cohort of students while supervising the other. And all he has to do is walk around the perimeters of his little orange wall. They tested this to death in a virtual environment before they do it, because this is pretty bloody brave. Yeah? Because the teachers would say that'd be one less teacher, wouldn't it? And we don't want to go there, do we? But you know, they would not have been brave enough to trial this stuff practically on site without virtual modelling there in the first place and being able to engage their stakeholders. The good news is this thing doesn't have a clock on, so I'm going to overrun. Kitted parts, that tends to suggest everything's going to look the same, doesn't it? Well, these don't, do they? Do they all look different? You wouldn't imagine that they were purchased from a standardised kit of parts approach, would you? So you don't get, and that's the challenge from the architects. Always, standard kit of parts challenges my design integrity, my artistic creativity, my flair, my all the other things that are very expensive I don't quite understand. But actually it doesn't, does it? You know, you can get good outcomes, good products, happy, different looking places. They've also moved on, and we're starting to touch on the case studies a little bit here. They've moved on to using BIM on some of the refurbishment of their existing buildings. Manchester has some fabulous buildings, grade 2, star listed, very expensive, don't do that buildings. And there are two of those that right next door to each other, similar budgets, that are being refurbished at the moment. One's using BIM, one isn't. So we get a like-for-like comparison, or so we thought, but we'll go there later. And this is just showing you some of the visualisation outputs that have been used for stakeholder engagement. They're also the things that you'll see on the hoardings when you go to Christmas markets in Manchester. So the outputs of their BIM model are being used in a number of ways that aren't necessarily project related from a practical and operational and building point of view. And I guess that's a free benefit, isn't it? Some of the challenges of the building. One of them was a library, as you might have guessed from rather a lot of shelves blocking up the space. Yeah? Look what they're going to do with it. The bit that will do your noodling is the fact that I'm going to tell you that that racking system and shelving system was actually structural to the building. So they really, really had to start to optioneer their way through how they were going to create usable space out of something that was likely to fall over if they took the things out too quickly. And they use digital modelling, and they use BIM models. And they might not end up with the right outcome, but they'll definitely end up with more cock-ups than they would have done if they hadn't done it that way, I think. And that's what John would say to you. John's dead clear about certain things as his obligation as a client, and one is that he mustn't specify too much what he wants, but by the same token, he mustn't underspecify either. It has to deliver his outcomes and his objectives. And his version of this is that he's a bit of a petrol head, and that's most unlikely if ever you've seen him. He just doesn't look like a petrol head. He likes German cars. He quite likes grey. So this is what he thinks he's going to go and buy from his specification. But arguably, if that's all that he did and the sum total of his specification, here's a German car, it's petrol, it's grey, and it's a long way from that. But it meets his specification, and the market's responded to him in a way that's compliant, but might not necessarily delight him. And somewhere there's a balance in there for the client, for how he behaves. And that's very, very true of BIM, because, get me, they don't understand this stuff, just like a lot of the supply side don't understand this stuff. And in the middle, there's a real heating up marketplace of service providers and software providers and contractors and suppliers actually, who are overstating their capability and their skills to be able to win the work. Right? So it's a difficult place to be. But he recognises this specification thing, and he recognises that whichever end of the scale he's going to be at, he's going to be wrong. He just wants to be at the least wrong point that he can, I think. So there's a local client's perspective as to why it's important to BIM in the context of real spend on real projects on live capital programmes now. So let's have a little look at national government and start to look at that strategy thing as to what actually has been done and decisions made. First of all, as with any good case, I'm just going to pour water all over Naheem's laptop before we move on.
Works much better with
He'd kill me if I did. He looks like a real gentle bloke, but a bit of a ninja if you mess with his kit. They came up with a hypothesis and a broad sweeping statement, and I don't think anyone would disagree with this, would they? Is it an alright starting point? Phew, but we started in the right place anyway. There was a certain amount of assessment done of risks to this BIM thing, yeah? And the first one was that actually we might just end up with more BUM than BIM, yeah? And if you haven't got glasses to be able to read the writing, it's building useless models. Visualization can be very, very powerful. It can communicate really, really well. The number of visualizations of retail outlets and new buildings that are wrapped up in a Simpsons sky for the purposes of planning and enrolling the client and winning the tender and getting the opportunity to build the project. But actually they might be next door to a knocking shop and a bargain booze, and the visualisation should give the real context. So the building useless models things has been going on for a long time, and we just want a bit less of that, really. It's not that visualisation is a bad thing, it's that it has its place. And actually, there's not enough BIM around. And BIM includes visualisation, it includes stakeholder engagement, it includes communication, but it includes lots of other things as well. And can we please get the balance right as to the buying decisions and the investment decisions? So the policy is wrapped around the wider picture of these things, and hopefully trying to avoid too much of that really pretty but not necessarily very useful pitching gear. We talked about push and pull. I think there's been 10 years worth of BIM or more, but actually not a lot of sophisticated adoption of it, other than in very tight hotspots. And I think there hasn't been much adoption because nobody said you have to do that. So there was something about the client leadership thing, that decision will cause the market to move forwards. There was also a quiet recognition, partly from John and I, that when we were working on those working groups, you can demand it, but actually, if you're going to procure it, you've got to understand what it is. You've got to have a level of competency, or otherwise you might make a bad buying decision. So there's a recognition perhaps that the majority of the clients and procuring clients aren't sophisticated enough in their understanding and knowledge and application of BIM to be able to make a good buying decision. So when you look at the training section of the strategy, you'll find it's targeted at much at the clients as it is at the supply side, because my statement was I think the leaders in the supply side are way ahead of the leaders in the client side, and I think that lag passes down through the top third of both. And then you get to a bit of a melee of confusion and misunderstanding, which all needs help. So the client push me, pull you type arrangement is absolutely key to being able to deliver this. We will demand it, but also we won't prescribe it to death, and we will expect the market to adapt and to change its offer and to deliver to us an output-driven solution that complies with our expectations. The hypothesis was drilled down into a number of key points. I'm not going to read them out for you because that will guarantee that some people will go to sleep. There is nothing in here that you will find at variance to the principles of good constructor. Oh, another fiver, bloody hell, fire. Who's this? Oh, a bloke with a green jumper. No, not you? Either that or he's very good at sleight of hand, isn't he? Yeah? I'm not going to read these to you, but there is nothing in here that should challenge your business model if you are a respectable, professional, ethical trader or a probitious, compliant, procuring client. So Paul Morel, he was over here a couple of weeks ago, so you all know who he is. He made some sweeping statements. We've commissioned 5 minutes to go.
High five.
All right, okay. Yeah, all right. Can I charge for acceleration? Probably not. Paul Morel made some sweeping statements. He pulled together a team. There have been 122 people involved in this, and it goes up to a decision-making group of 11, and John and I are 2 of the 11 that sit over the top of all the working groups. Every dynamic you're going to discuss in your question and answers has already been addressed within the strategy, and there are special leaders on each of those group areas. I'm going to romp a bit now.
I don't want to rush you, I'm joining
You do, you're rushing me already, you know that. But he's the boss, isn't he, so we have to behave ourselves. The working group, the progress that was made. I think what I want you to get from this is that it's been rumbling around for 18 months or so before anyone came out with making any sweeping statements about adoption, mandation and other things. And also, what they wanted to do was kind of join it up with a whole load of other stuff that they were doing. So there's 3 pieces of policy that came out of the government within a 2 and a bit month period. One's the construction strategy, one's the IGT carbon report, and the other one is the BIM strategy. And they do very simple things. Right back to that more for less thing. One of them demands 20% reduction in prices. The other one demands 26% reductions in carbon. Where they got 26% from, I don't know. I just think they maybe didn't want to do 2 at 20% or something. And the other one, and both of them said, and one of the useful tools that will be able to deliver these cost savings, these efficiency gains, and these carbon gains is BIM. Here's the policy for BIM. Okay, so there's strategy, interlinking and being joined up. God forbid it sounds as though someone might have been thinking about this thing in government. So here's your government strategy, the exact words: collaborative 3D BIM, as a minimum by 2016. I will tell you now they're going to accelerate that target to 2015, and you'll see some of why in a minute. But really why? I think there's an election in 2015. If it's good, they want to claim some good stuff, and if it's bad, they want to ditch it. But the target's moving. Yeah, 5 years felt like the right time. Actually, the progress that's been made in the last 12 months has surprised everybody, so they're comfortable with pulling that target forward. It's a phased process. We don't want everything brilliant by tomorrow, thanks. So, you know, don't panic. In the words of, who was it? Not Captain Mannering, Corporal Jones, there we are. Dad's Army fan, fantastic. Even looks a bit like him. To allow industry time to prepare and adopt and change its ways to be able to deliver to the expectation. The cash versus carbon thing, we talked about 2 calibrations which BIM can deliver to. The words of Morel, cash is king and carbon is queen. Why? Because cash is king because of money. Money is a challenge now, probably for 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. How long is it going to be before it hurts less? 7? 7 an alright number? Carbon, big problem. When are those targets? 2020, 2030, 2050. Different time scale, same sort of challenge, different currency. So my cut at this is cash is king now because everyone seems to be in the cack a bit. But it's a recoverable position, hopefully. God bless the euro. Carbon may not be. And actually, once that eases on the money, and they're already value engineering out good things, aren't they, to save money on projects, not that they'd ever admit that. God, was that us and them? I suppose it was. Your carbon challenges are still going to be there. We'll be behind the game on the targets. So the Queen is going to ascend to the throne once the pressure eases on the King. That's the sort of storyline. So let's move on to BIM a bit. Client understanding, government understanding thing. I think most projects, historically, because it wouldn't be like this anymore, would they, work mainly on paper. The paper is generated from lots and lots of nodes of IT technology, which communicate through paper, and there's an ownership issue, and stuff gets mixed up and stuff gets lost, and we have to have robust QA, change management, and change control systems to be able to try and keep a handle on this mess. Yeah? It wouldn't take a genius to work out that. Oh, it did actually, because they had to map everything, didn't they? But one of the outcomes of this really useful, punchy mapping exercise, I think, is in the big black bold type. It's actually about skills and people and culture and mindsets, and only a bit of it is about technology. Because back here, we've got lots of technology around the outside. It's just the communication and attitude approaches that are challenging its effective use. So 80% human issues, 20% technology. Sorry if that upsets any of the suppliers that are outside trying to sell you stuff, but hey, they can have 20% of your budget and be happy, can't they? This is their definition of BIM. A 3D modelling system, active data sharing, and past completion through monitored performance of the project in its own integrity. So whole life as much as construction and design and budget control. So if we can get to a BIM world, it would look like this, wouldn't it? And all we've done is pulled the technology from around the outside of the circle into the middle here to identify the topic areas that we could have. So if it's 3D, 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, however many Ds it is, I don't care. More Ds than 3 is the way it has to be. And to get away with a paper transaction and to have a quality controlled, change controlled, quality assured management system and a data library that allows that communication to occur with all the protections that already sit within the paper-based system and the contracts that are on site. That's where we need to be. The truth is, I think that there are very few projects that work in this way properly. There are probably lots of good people who want to work this way but actually feel a bit like this because they want to do it but everybody else isn't. So there's some disconnect, and that's why we're on a journey which has got time for the market to be able to adapt and respond to deliver an integrated approach within a 4 to 5 year period. I'm really going to fly at these now, Alan, before you start raising that 1 minute left thing. Yeah? BIM is a new thing, isn't it? Yeah. Well, actually, no. We've always tried to communicate what we want to achieve before we've achieved it in a way to embrace the people who are going to be the beneficiaries of this. We used to use small wooden models. It moved on to drawings and paper. There's all this fiberboardy, polystyrene, God knows how they cost £4,000. I really don't know. Anyway, there's all these different models that were there, and BIM is just the next iteration of those. And when you look at the decisions that have been made and the technologies that are available, no great surprise that wood, paper, plastic and polystyrene, someone brings in computing, and all of a sudden there's lots of things that are available to us, and BIM is just the latest version of these things. Yeah? Does anybody know what the most profitable part of Reba London is? The bit that sells those in frames. How does that work? I don't know. Okay, so what we started to do with BIM to try and understand the marketplace was we modelled it to a typical maturity model. Most people familiar with these? Every product goes through rather a lot of thinking, research and development. Some people start doing it. It generally gets recognised as something that lots of people might want to do. Then lots of people start adopting, and as soon as they start adopting, the premium price of research and development falls away. It becomes a commodity. The market competes on functionality, and the price falls and the function goes up. Yeah? One of the big arguments is who's going to pay the big premium for BIM? And I'll have big arguments with anyone about this because I'm not sure there is a big premium on it. But if we can move this forwards by setting our policy in the right sort of way, we can close that chasm, we can get the price to fall quicker, and the suppliers to compete in the marketplace on functionality. Because one of the other criticisms is functionality and interoperability. I think that some of the suppliers, and please don't throw things at me, I'm renowned for insulting people and upsetting them, there was a VHS and Betamax moment going on there. Somebody thought someone was going to choose software solution A rather than B. And whilst people thought that, they weren't right keen at getting A to talk to B. So there was a technicians group, there was a suppliers group, and they were sat in a room and they were told the government were not going to do a VHS Betamax decision. Sort yourselves out, kiddies. Get it to work together, collaborate more and solve the interoperability problems. By the way, because we're crap at technology, meet the bloke from IBM, meet the bloke from Oracle. They're here to facilitate your integration. And by the way, if you don't sort it inside a year, these guys have already agreed to invest some of their R&D money in translation engines off the back and as added value to the government contracts that they're providing already. Is that a bit scary and manipulative and things? I blame John Lorimer. Only he could have an idea like that. That really happened. And has it felt any different on interoperability issues over the 9 months? Perhaps a bit. Don't know, but it's definitely moving anyway. There are all sorts of dirty tricks going on in the background to close that chasm, get the price right, take out the premium cost of adoption. Because the truth is, it's really difficult to borrow money. So one of the suppliers was telling me to be able to make the software investment decision in a major architect's practice at the moment. So why wouldn't we do something to help with that if we could? Familiar with the BIM maturity model? Yeah? Why did we want one of these? So all those clients understood what it meant in a graphical form, because blokes do pictures better than words. We had to help them a bit because the graphical form was a bit complicated, so we put the cartoon version along the bottom of what it might look like in an expectation from a procuring client who wasn't particularly adept at BIM, so they could make informed buying decisions. I've just had the magic finger raised at me, yeah.
Yes.
And to be able to know what we need to do in terms of accreditations and standards and adaptions and things, we mapped those out as well, as much to see the gaps as to avoid duplicating and redoing work that existed already to support the strategy. I hope you're getting that there was some level of thought and sophistication behind this, and we're trying desperately not to waste time and money. There were some anticipated benefits that were articulated. What I would ask you to do with this is just see that the red line reflects what can be expected on projects through collaborative working, and the green line through the application of BIM. And it articulates one key thing here, that the benefits of BIM are really cashed in through the operation of the asset, not necessarily huge during the construction and design phase. It's the consequences of good design decisions that pay off during the operation of the asset. And that makes a bit of a challenge to an investment decision and the procurement exercise and the offer. But that's how it's seen and that's how it's understood. Is the market responding? Yeah, well, yeah, we got some brilliant examples of clients asking tough questions in their tender documents. Here are some of them. There's my glasses going. Here are some of them. Some of them are good. Some of them are not so bloody good. Ministry of Justice framework. Bottom one, how many BIM licenses does your company have? I don't think there's any such thing as a BIM license, is there? There's rather a lot of software licenses that might be able to work together to create a BIM solution, but there's no such thing as a BIM license. So, the clients don't get what they're buying yet, but they're on the same journey as the supply side. So let's have a look at the supply side. Here are some examples of things that are being done in businesses. And for the contractors in the room, even though he was picking on me before, you might want to take note of some of this stuff because it's stolen from behaviours and changes within some of your opposition. Yeah? These are the things, and they start to prompt decisions. What's a BIM coordinator? Where should he live? Is he an architect? Is he a contractor? We're down to the last 2 slides before you raise me my last half a finger. But I'm giving you this because I want you to see how the market's moving and reacting. And the next thing are actually a couple of extracts from tender submissions by contractors towards the questions around BIM. Okay? So this contractor chose to articulate the anticipated performance of the project he was tendering. This one. I think the question went, show me how and that you will deliver level 2 by a point in time on my project. And their approach was, actually, let's just show them what we're doing now. That's my last practical completion project. Please see case study attached. Here's the BIM sophistication of the average project that's coming through your framework, Mr. Client. And you want me to go from here to here. Okay, I'll make you a promise I can do that. Actually, you should feel comfortable with me rather than, I won't point at him, but somebody else. Because I'm doing more than you ask of me already elsewhere. Can you see how they're articulating their maturity in the marketplace? And do we believe any of this stuff? Not much evidence there, is there? There's a case study, which you don't see. They're using abstract images to be able to prove that these things are real on some of the projects they do. And then they got a bit clever in that they pulled apart some of the definitions and attributes of BIM. They chose to analyse the case studies that they put forward against that matrix of BIMness, and they put dates to them to show how they're getting progressively better over time. As a procuring client, would you begin to believe that these people can make that leap for you on your project? More so than someone who just gives you words with not much evidence. So that competitiveness in the marketplace, the selling of it, has started to become sophisticated. It's started to become evidence-driven. And it's really, really important stuff because it shows that they're in a different place and that they're actually embracing these things. And that, oh, by the way, they've got an improvement and development plan to do more than you asked them to do anyway. And by the way, it'll be in place by 2012 because I think the national target's 2016, isn't it? So these are the questions that, before I thought too much about coming here, that I thought you probably want to be talking about later. Once I got thinking about it properly, is it worth thinking about them? I'm not sure it really is. Because will you get it anyway? Because it's becoming business as normal elsewhere. It's just what happens. So I changed the questions that I want you to think about. And first of all, let's assume there's limited construction spend. The question you should be asking yourself over here is, how do your clients keep up with the supply side? Because if the money's not being spent here, they will be providing services elsewhere, and the elsewhere market that's closest is the UK, and the UK is moving on this agenda, whether you are or whether you aren't. How do your suppliers keep competitive on the mainland? They have to do this. And if they're going to do this, then how does Ireland's offer of the next generation of construction people meet with this market demand? Because whether you mandate this or whether you don't, you're going to get it, because it's becoming integral to the business offer of the supply side elsewhere. And there's one other big question there, and I think this is no bloody question at all, like, but everybody comes up with, who owns this model thing? Well, this doesn't apply to you, but where I come from, the answer's pretty simple. Yeah? So that's me done. Thank you.